That is bad. Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, off the back of the chain of more supportive job sets, this time we're playing jobs that don't offer as much aside from damage and maybe a little berry or something to the party. Additionally, this set also took place in the first week of the 7.3 Mockdome event and featured surprisingly few Mockdome event relevant duties. That said, for duty 1 we are an instant replacement Viper in Labyrinth of the Ancients. For the Dragon boss, we once again see the center inwards dragon position. I really don't quite understand why, but if I had a nickel for each time I saw this positioning take place, with no one questioning it, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but moving on. To contrast last week, this time we saw Behemoth kill at least 1 player with a meteor. For duty 2, we went to Ignore the Flames with Ilana. This is a pretty funny level range for Viper, as you only have 1 AoE button, but the full 1, 2, 3 for single target. As everything must be killed to finish the duty, once the hounds start to pile up, producing a wacky 1, 1, 2, 3 combo sequence might actually be a solid plan, especially if your co-DPS also has decent AoE options. Simply start every 1, 2, 3 with Reaving Fangs, and then when the combo is finished, start with Steel Maul, and then Reaving Fangs again. For duty 3, we went to Rubicante, a Mockdome relevant duty, and oddly someone immediately left. Oh well, we're here with Gazel, Snowshiro and Nox taking up the whole DPS roster. This is of course the fight that features one solution fits every scenario, the mechanic. And of course, an ad phase, as well as a cutscene planted right around when a 2-minute burst takes place. And then in the second phase, Rubicante just rapid fires mechanics that can snipe you, starting with Flame Rake, which is a somewhat strange line AoE that spreads into waves that almost always catches at least 1 player. Then we have the Soul Scald, which goes out and then back again, which also tends to catch players. And then there's the very wide Tank Busters. Speaking of which, I'm not sure if one of our tanks here was just really confused or was out for blood, but if you are going to try and snipe people with that for the memes, at least do it right. Stand like right up onto the boss and then flip the cone a full 180 a moment before it resolves. Don't actually do this, by the way. Despite these memes, we of course still cleared with no major issues, although we didn't manage to clear before the boss switched back to phase 1. For duty 4, we went to M1N, Arcadion's Black Cat, with Taldemar, Gazel and Ilana. And this went very well with only a bit of death. For Viper in a duty like this, with at least 1 raid buff of some sort, holding such that you can double reawaken for the 2-minute is a pretty solid strategy. I also highly recommend holding 1 Vicewinder to use just before you go into the double reawaken, as that tends to let your buffs hold more reliably. Over the course of the fight, I would typically do this, but if for some reason I didn't have Vicewinder on time, I would instead do a single reawaken, then Vicewinder, and then another reawaken to be sure my buffs would not run out. Next, some boss tips. When Black Cat uses Mouser, if you simply keep track of the center 4 squares, she will always leave 2 squares only half broken. So by limiting your search to those 4, you can more easily keep track of which order they're struck in, and which ones are only going to be hit once. Next, the Elevate and Eviscerate mechanic will either target all of the supports or all of the DPS one by one. Conveniently, this means that if the fight is ended fast enough, she will not be able to reach this mechanic a second time, leaving half of the raid uneviscerated. Finally, for that sequence, I highly recommend using your knockback immunity for the knockback there, as this mechanic is spaced out so much that you will have your immunity back for every single one of them. My other tip, which is again more Viper specific, is about Devour or Predacious Pounce. Save 3 coils for this one and try to keep track of a safe space to stand in closer to the center, as Black Cat will jump around enough that you might be out of range if you flee to a corner. Our team here was very strong of course, so we did manage to skip the majority of the second Mouser sequence. For duty 5, we went to Under the Shoe for some 1-2-1-1 action. Once again, a funny reminder that while Viper seems very busted in this level range, I believe Reaper is actually even stronger. For duty 6, we went to Garuda Extreme with Taldemar tanking and Nox, Ilana and Snowshiro on the DPS, with me. However, the other tank is a first-timer. The fight starts pretty normally, with everyone dodging the Mistral Song through the center, and then things get a bit strange when the ads spawn. Our Sprout tank offered to take Garuda, which implies with our strategy that they also take Sapana, but they were told this, they agreed to that. And then Taldemar took Tirada to the south. What actually happened is that both of the ads ran to the south. However, thanks to the DPS squad all knowing to destroy Tirada first, we managed to get it down to 27% before the damage reduction set in on the ads, and further down to 21% by sheer force of will through the reduction. And then Garuda and Sapana swapped places, which made the last part of Tirada a lot easier to overcome. And then we simply fixed the ad phase from there. Although, Garuda suddenly hit us hard with a wicked wheel. And after the raid wipe, we need to either get Garuda from 52% to 0, or be ready with a tank limit break on time when she leaves to come back with another raid wipe. And we do manage to clear the plumes, and get Garuda to about 3% before she leaves, and Taldemar uses limit break, although maybe a tad bit early. Not that it mattered, as we simply killed the boss before the raid wipe is cast. Somewhat chaotic, but a first pull clear nonetheless. For duty 7, we went to 08N, Omega's Kefka, and the other Viper knew me. Hello! A level 70 duty, which is a convenient time for me to reiterate that the Vicewinder combo at this level is approximately 10% more damage per second than the regular 1-3 filler combos, so they can be used as a somewhat weak burst window. For Kefka then, in addition to his question mark mix-ups, he also has two knockback related mechanics that tends to catch players off guard. The first one is Graven Image, which summons a huge statue that conjures a big green orb that knocks you away from it. Except in the very last moment before it explodes, sometimes the orb jumps to the other side of the arena. And if you're not paying attention to it, that is usually how you die in this fight. The other mix-up is Timely Teleport. Most of the time, Kefka simply fires a wide AoE in front of him, so you need to hide behind him. But sometimes, when he reaches his destination, he instead starts casting something. That something is Aero Assault, which is a knockback. And indeed, if you were in position to dodge the frontal attack, you will die from the knockback if you don't react. And naturally, the reason he gets you with this one is because of how infrequently he uses that version. Of course, we didn't have any major issues here. For duty 8, we went to Toad Fortress as Pictomancer, and aside from just spamming the Fire and Red combo, there's nothing we can do to go any faster. For duty 9, we went to O12N, Omega M and Omega F, which is a Mark Tome event duty, just like the Kefka fight earlier. For Pictomancer, the only real optimization advice I can give for this level range is that I believe 4 subtractive pallet GZDs and then the full hammer combo, plus a Living Muse and Mark of the Ages, is the best you can do for the burst. Aside from that, use all of the cooldowns as you get them. For Omega then, I have 2 tips. The first one is, once again, that whenever the bosses turn to goop and one player is targeted with a spread and another with a stack, aim to get them to the edge of the arena. Preferably perpendicular to each other, but really just get them out there. Why? Because it makes it a lot easier to aim the knockback that originates from Omega F without dumping into Omega M. That's it really. The other tip, which is a lot simpler, is just a reminder that when the final phase starts, half the party will be unable to attack F, while the other half unable to attack M. If you have the blue debuff, it means you have to attack F, while having the red debuff means attack M. I think this is worth mentioning simply because of how frequently I see, like, one player attacking the wrong one for the whole fight. Anyway, we got through quite nicely. For duty 10, we went to M8N, Arcadion's Howling Blade, and this run went a lot better than that time when I was here as Red Mage. For about half of my burst windows, I felt compelled to delay briefly simply because it happened to overlap with a high mobility mechanic. I imagine there's a way to make it work without delaying it, but as I don't play Pictomancer frequently enough, I wasn't certain, and I valued being sure I got value out of my Starry Muse higher. I feel like it mostly worked out though. A general tip for Pictomancer in regards to Starry Muse is that as long as a full hammer combo, Comet, and 3 subtractive spells, Star Prism and Rainbow Drip fits inside, the exact order isn't crucially important, or rather, if you're not confident you can stay where you start for long, then sending the subtractive spells sooner so you can finish using the lawn itself is a solid idea. Not to mention that about half of the burst window is filled with instant spells, so getting the ones with cast times out the door sooner rather than later will be immensely helpful. But as I said, this run went very well. I think we had a grand total of 1 death or so. For duty 11, we went to Thornmarch hard, and Nox is here. For Pixelmans are here then, remember to send everything you have on the initial Mox Guard phase, to help get the fight along faster. Also, if you can finish off the last Mox Guard with 0 motifs already painted, that's a very convenient time to repaint. The other regular tip for Pixelmans at this level is, unless there is any AoE to be had, make sure to use an even number of living muses, as Pom Muse on its own is actually a damage loss over casting fire and red combos, at least if you painted it while you had other options. And thankfully, this time around, I actually remembered to not bother painting a Pom Muse again when the fight was ending. For duty 12, we went to Ultima Weapon Extreme, and Naomi is here. And the party was great. In addition to the level 50 Pixelmancer tips from the previous duty, there is of course something specific to this fight. As usual, what it takes to win this fight is primarily dealing with the orbs correctly. Each orb does shared damage around them when they explode, and a single orb tends to do enough damage to one-shot a lone DPS or healer. But with some barrier help, you might be able to take one alone, which is what leads us to Pixelmancer, as conveniently, you have Tempera Coat, which might just be enough to take an orb alone. Whenever possible, I tried exactly this, but since everyone participated in orb soaking, it didn't really come up as necessary, and we easily cleared the duty in no time. For duty 13, we went for some gob name stealing. In a funny similarity to Viper, Pixelmancer also does something weird for their AoE at this level. Since both the single target and AoE option pushes along the same combo, you could technically use the AoE Fire 2 in red, followed by the green and blue single target steps, since the AoE options aren't available yet. However, at this level, Fire 2 in red is a gain on 3, and it beats all 3 single target steps on 3, so the only time where this really matters is when the target count drops from 3 or above down to 2. But hey, still kind of funny that it is an option. And finally for duty 14, we went to Underkeep with Nox. And once again a reminder that the first boss leaves the arena just about 28 seconds or so after the fighting starts. So if your burst isn't ready when the fight begins, probably save it for after the boss returns. In this run specifically, we had a bit of a funny incident on the first pull after the second boss. Only the big Terror Knights were still alive when the 2-minute burst came up, so I felt like it made sense to hold cooldown for the next pull. Incidentally, based on how long it took to take these guys down, everyone else thought the same, until Nox just went, I'll do it, and just sent the burst. A classic awkward situation when the burst doesn't line up just right. Next, for the last pull, I used my full 2-minute burst, realizing I should have led with a limit break before starting it, leading to me using it after the burst. Although, the tankiness of some of the mobs meant not that much was lost, and we end up clearing the duty in a pretty solid 13.5 minutes. I had actually intended to cover more than just the 2 Dawntrail jobs, but I guess that's just how it would be this time. We also had some extremes, but thanks to solid players, we easily plowed through those too. Not to mention, about a fifth of the duties were Marktome relevant. And, of course, we are now past 1728 on the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, as a result of the strong focus on damage output we tend to have when optimizing, we have a pretty clear picture of what DPS jobs don't help with damage boosting buffs, Black Mage, Machinist, Viper, Samurai. In contrast, the job with the least defensively helpful buffs is Viper, featuring exclusively the role actions they're offered, and nothing else. Many jobs come in second place by having just one personal defensive cooldown, but no one can quite compete with Viper's big fat 0 on the job-specific defensive options.